All right, as the debate over the removal of Confederate statues heats up, the question is, are the historical figures heroes or are they villains? Are they our founders?
Now, some people even want these monuments of our nation's most influential leaders, like President George Washington, to be taken down.
Yeah, that wasn't just hearsay the president brought up last week. Here to weigh in is George Washington, law professor. At least that's now what we call your law school. Jonathan Turley, who knows? We have to change the capital. So let's talk about this. Is there a legal precedent for tearing this stuff down?
Well, legally, people can do whatever they want with statues. That doesn't mean that it's wise. The fact is, history is complex. One of the things that law professors and historians try to teach students is that history is not that neat. You learn from it, including the mistakes. These statues represent sort of markers in our history where we evolved. George Washington was a transitional figure in that sense. At the end of his life, he was steadfastly opposed to slavery. He's the only founder and the only slave-owning president who freed his slaves at the end of his life. He even required that some of the slaves be given lifetime pensions to support them. Now, does that excuse the fact that he was a slave owner? Of course it doesn't. That's where we need to learn from those types of great and horrible mistakes. But that doesn't mean that we remove their images. We need to understand who these people were.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because there's some statues, there's a long list of individual states and what statues they're removing in the New York Times. And there's some people ruled that African Americans, both enslaved and free, could not be American citizens. So, of course, I think most people would agree that those statues or those monuments need to be torn down. But when you look at the history, you look at these people, George Washington, you said, ended up doing a good thing at the end of his life by freeing his slaves and then giving them pensions. Where's the limit, though? Because you've got this bishop in Chicago who wants to take down George Washington and Andrew Jackson statues. Where is the limit?
Former presidents.
Well, that's why I think we need to have a civil debate about how we deal with these founders and these images. At Princeton, there is a movement to strip Woodrow Wilson's name from that university, a university that he helped create. It's a world-class university because he supported segregation. At University of Virginia, the president was denounced because she merely quoted Thomas Jefferson, and because he was a slave owner.
By the way, he founded the University of Virginia.
That's right. And what these movements represent is just a lack of balance. But more importantly, we need to have this discourse as a nation. It could be a healthy thing. Right. But removing statues in the middle of the night or demanding that all these things be bulldozed under with the history they represent is not good for a country.
Jonathan Turley, you know, I'm doing a book on Andrew Jackson, and there's a big movement now. It was pulled up temporarily to pull him out of Jackson Square at the Battle of New Orleans, the city he saved in a country he possibly saved as well, because they're not a perfect person. 200 years, is it right to project today's values on anyone that lived 200-plus years ago? No one should be proud of it, but should we run from it? In 2008, Barack Obama said marriage between a man and a woman. In 2012, he was for same-sex marriage. Was he a horrible person in 2008, and was he an enlightened person in 2012? Who should we be looking up to?
Well, I mean, I think you make the point. You can learn a lot from Jackson. Jackson did have a lot of flaws, but he was a character that represented his time. And I want students to go there and understand all the aspects of these leaders. I don't actually think it's useful to just treat leaders as blind heroes, as absolute figures. You learn a lot more when you find out that they made terrible mistakes.
I think 9 of the first 12 presidents had slaves. You know, outside John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Should we just wipe them out of our books? Should we look at them with disdain, or understand that we continue to evolve and there's no perfect person who walked Earth, maybe one? Right?
I know who that is.
Right.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.